Hello, and welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. It's me, your host, Eric Herlock. I am here today to tell you that this is the last episode of 2023. I think this has been season 3. Even though we've been doing this for 5 years, I was never great at math. Anyway, I may have promised you in the recent past a year in review episode where I look back at all of our guests throughout the year and maybe play a little clip of something insightful that they said. And yes, I would love to have that for you. I'm just running out of time. I have a lot to do. I know you do too, so I'll just cut to the chase here. Last week, I went up to Massachusetts for a couple of days. I took a little mini hemp tour. I went to Cape Cod, where I visited with Michael Monteiro and his Cape Cod Hemp House. You know Michael, he is from Impactful Ventures, one of our generous sponsors. Well, he and his wife have just built a gorgeous hemp house on Cape Cod. So I visited with him on Thursday, and we're going to hear parts of my visit with him on today's show. And then on Friday, I went up to Newburyport, Massachusetts, and I talked to David Hall. He is from Hall in Moscow. That's the company that is building the Hillside Center for Sustainable Living. They've already got 30 units built and people living in this, passive solar community. And then this next phase of the community is made from Hempcrete. So we're going to be on site there. They were using a crane to move girders and things while I was there on Friday. So we're going to hear my interview with David. So all that today. It was a great little trip. It was quick. I went up Thursday morning. I came back Sunday afternoon. And so I'll tell you a little bit about it as we go. So we'll take a quick sponsor break and then we'll get into my mini hemp tour of Eastern Massachusetts. All right, well, since this is the last episode of the year, I want to give just a big shout out of gratitude to all of my sponsors that we've had this year in 2023. So, in no particular order, thank you to American Cast Hemp, King's Agri Seeds, the National Hemp Association, Impactful Ventures, Cornell University, Sunray Hemp up there in Palmer, Alaska, and IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana. And what all of these organizations have in common, apart from their generous support of what I'm doing here on the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast, what they have in common is the passion for this plant and the belief in the goodness of hemp. So I know that's IND Hemp's tagline, but it's big enough for everybody. So thank you all to our sponsors and listeners. I encourage you to go visit them, go check them out. Go to their websites. I'll have the links on the show page for this episode. Go talk to Cameron at American or reach out to Sarah Mitchell at King's Agri Seeds. You can talk to Erica Stark at the National Hemp Association or reach out to Michael and Mary at Impactful Ventures. The folks at Cornell University, they would love to hear from you. Ray up there in Alaska, he'd probably love to hear from you too. And the folks in Fort Benton at IND are waiting to hear from you as well. So yeah, go check them out. Let's support these companies as they support this industry. And so I am very grateful to our sponsors. So thank you. Okay, so before we get to my trip, I do have a nugget of hemp news. This one I found on mangabay.com, which is news and inspiration from nature's frontline. So this story is written by Sarah DeRowan, and the headline reads, "Some hemp with your wine? Study shows better soil, potentially better flavors from intercropping." All right, so I'll just read you a paragraph here and then let you go check it out. It says, a recent case study on a vineyard in New Zealand tested how planting hemp between grape rows might improve soil conditions while providing a secondary cash crop. After 3 years of testing, the researchers found there were positive benefits for both soil health and carbon storage, as well as a surprising development. The wine tasted better. All right, thanks, hemp. What can't hemp do? All right, and just one more thing here, one more nugget. I'm not going to read you the story. I'm just kind of letting you know it's out there. But if you haven't seen it, Robert Hoban has been writing a series on industrial hemp for Forbes, and the 5th and final installment was published this week. It's called Hemp. I Can Tell Your Future. Just look what's in your hand. All right, so I'll put a link to that on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. And I am really looking forward to speaking with Mr. Robert Hoban in the new year. I've got an interview scheduled with him. So I have lots of cool stuff coming up in the new year. We've got some new and exciting sponsors. We've got some new opportunities. We've got great people to talk to. So I'm excited about the new year. And this year of 2023 has been pretty awesome for me personally. I know it's a crazy world and there's a lot going on out there. For me, this has been just a year of positive change and good stuff. So I'll tell you more about that in the new year too. Anyway, let's get into my trip here today. So I left bright and early Thursday morning last week and landed in Boston by 7. I was on the road to Cape Cod by 8:30 or 9, and I was in Cape Cod by noon. Although I did stop in North Plymouth for breakfast on my way there. And actually, I interviewed Lindsay, the waitress. So I'm going to play that interview towards the end of the show. But I got to the Cape Cod Hemp House, and well, I'll just roll it from here. All right, so I'm here on Cape Cod in Harwich. We're at the Cape Cod Hemp House. So let's go see if Michael Monteiro is at home.
Eric, hey, welcome to the Cape Cod Hemp House.
Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good.
You picked a really nice day to come and visit here.
Yeah, thanks. It's nice and warm in here.
You never know what you're going to get this time of year on the Cape, but you picked a beautiful day. Welcome.
Thanks. So what do we got here? Give us the high-level description.
Sure. Well, you're standing in the great room, what we call the great room, and it may look like any other house here in the Cape. We have cedar sidewall shingles on the house, but there's a secret here. The house is actually insulated with a biobased material called hemp lime or hempcrete. So behind these white walls, we have an insulation material that doesn't come from oil. It actually comes from a plant.
Awesome. Well, you want to show me around? Show me some of your favorite spots here?
Well, sure. I guess we should probably start in the kitchen, because it'll give you an idea of why my wife and I love this location, this spot. It's really this view here overlooking Nantucket Sound on the Mid-Cape here in Harwich. So this is the kitchen with the view out back, looking over the Nantucket Sound area, and it blends here into the living room. And like I said, even though you see a lot of traditional features on the outside, there are some modern touches throughout. We went with this sort of Scandinavian, sort of clean aesthetic inside. So we like to spend time here with the kids. Hopefully someday I'll spend more time when the kids are a little bit older and they don't have school. But this is a really special spot for us.
Cool. Did you leave any hemp exposed?
Yeah, in the basement.
All right, let's go down and check that
I
out.
wanted people to be able to see what that's all about.
So yeah, down in the basement in sort of like the rec room area near the ping pong table, there is a beautiful exposed wall of hempcrete, and Michael picks it up from there.
This is a wall that's been insulated with hemp lime. We use this bio-based insulation throughout the house. We're in the basement level now, so we chose to leave this section of the wall unfinished. You would typically finish a hemp lime wall with lime plaster like we've done throughout, but we wanted to leave this one exposed so people could see what the material looks like once it dries and petrifies. This is a slightly different mix than what we used in the roof, because And the roof, we're concerned with weight, so we used a less dense mix up there, but this gives you a visual of what the material looks like. It also shows you how versatile it is, because we've applied this hemp line, or hempcrete as it's known, directly on masonry units or cinder blocks. And upstairs, of course, we've sprayed it into framed wall cavities against lath. So it gives you an idea of how versatile it is as an insulation material. And you can touch it, it's okay. Unlike other types of insulation like fiberglass,
right,
you can end up with like micro cuts in your hand or itchy after handling it. So it's a lot safer and more pleasant to install as well.
Right. We'll talk about the basement and why this is a unique basement.
Yeah, so I mentioned that this is applied on top of cinder blocks. That's unusual. Most basements are poured in place. They're forms. When you build up the foundation, they're poured with concrete. So we chose in this case to use cinder blocks because we're not today, but potentially down the road, going to be in a flood zone. We're right on the ocean here, looking over Nantucket Sound in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, on the Mid-Cape. And so if you're thinking about building a house using more sustainable materials, you really need to be thinking about resiliency, building with resiliency in mind. Why? Because the climate's changing. We're experiencing all around the world more frequent extreme storms, weather events. So the question isn't, are we in a flood zone today, or are we at risk today, but it's, what is it going to look like 20, 30, 40 years from now? And so we designed the basement in such a way that down the road, if and when we are in a flood zone, we could convert this basement. It's a finished basement today. We could remove all of the cinder block sections of the foundation so that it becomes an open basement or an open area, fill this in with sand, and then allow the storm surge to go underneath the house. We have piles underneath the beams of the basement floor, 40-foot long. That's an anchor, if you will. If you think about it like an anchor that's holding the structure in place. And then in each of the corners, we have these concrete piers, and that's what supports the structure. So the walls are really sacrificial. You could remove all of the walls down the road, which would allow the house to withstand storm surge in the future.
And it'll be on stilts.
It would be on stilts. You could raise it even higher, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. And apologies for the background noise there. I guess there's still a punch list, and there were some guys there doing some work in the house. All right, so next, Michael's going to talk about sort of the energy needs of the house and what went into designing this passive house.
So we designed the house with net zero in mind. Net zero simply means that the house is able to generate all the energy it needs, the renewable energy it needs to heat it, to cool it, to light it. And so with that in mind, we have solar arrays on the southern facing roofs looking toward Nantucket Sound. These are 2 inverters for the arrays. You know, it really starts when you want to design a net zero house. The first line of defense is making sure the envelope is really well insulated. Almost think of it like a thermos. Hemp lime is really great in that way because it's what they call a continuous insulation. There are no breaks like you would typically have in a conventionally built house. So think of it as a thermos with a really terrific insulating blanket around it. That's the first order of business. Then you add supplemental heating and cooling. You add really efficient air source heat pumps. In this case, we chose to use air source instead of ground source. But then you have these really efficient heating and cooling units. But if you've done your job right on the front end with that insulative blanket, then you're not having to use those heating and cooling units as much. And so then once you've built a really tight building envelope, you have efficient appliances. Now you have the array on the roof. In this case, it's generating the energy. We won't know until we have a little more operating history to see if we really did achieve net zero, but that was the design intent, to be able to do that.
And so we walked around the house a bit more, and he was pointing out features of the house that sort of set it apart, including the material choices they made.
So the roofing material, it's another example of a choice that we made that is a bit more sustainable than alternatives. Certainly, when you're building a roof with longevity in mind, a metal roof is going to last a lot longer than an asphalt roof. It still takes a lot of energy to make steel. So we chose instead to go with zinc, another metal, a natural metal that'll not only outlive even a standing seam steel roof. You know, a zinc roof could last up to 100 years or even longer, but it requires less processing, which is why we selected it. So there's less energy that's required to make it. So all of the roofing, the gutters, and the downspouts are made from zinc for that reason.
Then we walked around the outside of the house, and we were standing sort of on the edge of the property, right on the edge of the dune with the ocean behind us, looking up at the house in front of us.
This is Nantucket Sound, south facing, and you can see back at the Cape Cod Hemp House, the solar array on the roof here. The garage behind this has a roof as well facing the sound, and all of that roofing material, it looks like metal roofing. It is. It's made out of zinc. It should last 100 years and doesn't require as much energy to make as a steel roof would. And then of course, because we're on the Cape, we like our cedar shingles. The house, this is a hemp house, believe it or not, even though it's got traditional wood cedar shingles, and that's really just for aesthetics, so that we wanted to blend in with the local vernacular, but it really is just a facade of veneer. It's not the weather barrier, because of course a hemp house has a natural lime render that you finish with, and that becomes your natural air and weather barrier. A modern conventional house would typically have a synthetic house wrap that does that job. And we could have. They make house wraps that are vapor permeable. They're airtight, but they allow moisture to penetrate, which of course is important for a hemp wall. So we could have gone with a synthetic wrap. Of course, covering it with wood changes the thinking, because house wrap doesn't last forever. So we could have had a situation where the shingles are fine because there's an air gap and everything's drying out, but the wrap is deteriorating behind. It only has a useful life of about 20 to 25 years. A natural lime render will last forever. So might require some maintenance to fill some micro cracks here or there, but that lime render plaster will really last forever.
Okay.
So that's what you got.
This is the style of house. Can you talk about like the architectural style?
Sure. I mean, as you might be able to tell, it's got some modern aesthetic to it, but it is a traditional gable-style house. That was important to us. We wanted the house to blend in with the other homes here, so it's got two structures. This is the main part of the house, but it's got traditional forms. There are no corner boards, so like you'll see in a lot of more traditional styled homes. So it does have some modern touches to it. Black window trim instead of white that you'll typically see on the Cape. So there are a few modern tweaks here and there, but it was important, again, for us, because we're in a dense neighborhood, we wanted to blend in with the other homes. And so the house is largely a traditional form that you would see in New England, but with a few modern touches.
Yeah, so it was really great to be there at the house on Cape Cod. After our tour, I went out for lunch with Michael, and, we sat at a local restaurant. I had a lobster roll, and we just kind of shot the breeze about, our families and the holidays. Michael and I both have kids around the same age, so we have a lot in common, and I enjoyed my time hanging out with Michael. So thanks, Mike, if you're listening. Appreciate your time that day. From there, I headed out to Berkeley, Massachusetts, where I caught up with Jeremy Kletke. He was on the show a few weeks ago. It was not really an interview situation, but we just had dinner, Jeremy and his wife Jill. And after that, I went back up to where I was staying, north of Boston. And on Friday morning, I went up to Newburyport, and I visited the Hillside Center for Sustainable Living. I talked to the builder, David Hall, and we'll just listen to my conversation with David.
So cool to see the second floor.
Okay, so could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm David Hall, partner in Hall and Moscow, and partner Keith Moscow and I have been working on building projects together since we got out of school, so in the early 80s. And as the building projects have matured, this clearly is the most outside the box venture.
Talk about a little bit like the projects you worked on before you got here.
Yeah, so we actually first have dozens of small wood frame, timber frame often, historic buildings in the Newburyport area. And so those are always Pandora's box. You open up a wall, you open up a floor, a roof, whatever, you're finding much more work than you ever thought you could. So there was those projects. And then we bought a series of mill buildings on one block, which is now a block that's called the Tannery in Newburyport, which is about 80,000 square feet. And in that project, we actually installed the largest privately owned solar array at a whopping 60 kilowatts in 2004. And it was $8.70 a watt. So early. And I was struck then by how much interest people had in that. And pursuing a sort of community-minded or aware or stewardship as part of your development is an important feature. If you think about it, real estate and community work well together.
They should or could go hand in hand.
It can, and when it does, it works really well. So the Tannery is now home to about 58 businesses.
Okay.
Bookstore, cafe, bike store, deli, gift shop, a fish store, restaurants that goes on.
It's a
and on.
community hub down in the center of Newburyport.
And also importantly, a lot of instructional space. So dance class, music class, art,
The things
acting.
that thread a community together. The
exactly.
arts. Yeah,
Exactly.
excellent. All right, so you have those earlier things that you worked on with Keith Moscow.
Yep.
And then how long ago did this idea come to you?
Well, so this particular parcel came available right after the 2008 recession. And it was not a very appealing site. It had 70 abandoned vehicles on it. And it was clear there were some issues of contamination. So we acquired it, and knowing that we had a lot of cleanup to do, well, we did that. And then we also purchased these adjacent, actually the land that we're sitting on here right now had not transferred conventionally like a real estate transaction between parties in a lawyer's office. It had all been done through probate and deaths since the 1800s. So no one knew really who owned the property. So it took 2.5 years just to get through land court to clear up who owned that land in order to buy it.
But now you know who owns it.
Now we know, and we bought it, and it all worked out. But this site is a little under 5 acres, and what had transpired, and the reason there was some contamination on the site, was that in the early 1900s, the farmer who had cattle here also had the city trash contract for this section of the city. So he would take the coal ash, the clinkers, that everyone could gather from their coal furnace, that gets set outside the home every week, and the bottles, and dump them here. And he wanted to bring the field up so that there were fewer wet spots. And lo and behold, when you stack coal slag like that around, you get all the things that go along with it. So we hauled 100 trailer truckloads of material off this site to cap a landfill in southern New Hampshire. And then we started plotting in earnest. Okay, well, what are we going to do with this site? How's it going to work? And Newburyport is quite particular about quality of work and community, as we discussed earlier. So fortunately, we had a good track record here, and that was a huge leg up. But then we also really wanted to step out in front on, what would serve the community well, what would serve the planet well, and what would make at least a return on the investment. We're working on the last part still really hard. But in terms of what's good for the planet, it was clear that low carbon living was essential. This is going back 8 years now. And it's food, it's transportation, and housing, the three legs of the stool. And that is why when you go around, you'll see an enormous amount of PV and car chargers at the homes and under the common parking areas, under the solar arrays. And that is why we focused on permaculture. So we're really just about 2/3 of the way through this whole thing. So, and the permaculture aspect has yet to really explode, and we're all really excited about that piece.
Take time.
Yeah, it's gonna, exactly. So, and actually, our campus farmer Jeremy Tackett has just moved in, and we are ramping up to get what we call the Central Basin area graded and topped with very high quality soil and compost, so we can get our planting going.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this first phase was 30 units that were made with the panelization method, but with concrete.
Yes, meeting Passive House standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then talk about that journey from that style of panelization to the Hempcrete.
Right. Same exact dimensionally, exactly the same. However, before, what we would do is build a panel with pre-cut EPS foam blocks that would go together very nicely. And then we would insert into those blocks nailers, put the siding on, flip the wall panel, and then pour the concrete on the inside of the wall. So, and to speak to that for a moment, that has been and the density value of the concrete you also see in Hempcrete. But by putting that high density next to the living space, essentially it's a flywheel, it's a thermal flywheel. So once you get the homes at the right temperature, they don't move much at all. The stability, the thermal stability of the space is really lovely. And we in all these units. Well, let me back up on the panels. So that was the old concrete panel. The heaviest one of those was 25,000 pounds, so 14 ton. It was actually a fairly easy transition to refigure this as using a fill material in place of all that EPS and the concrete. Okay. So it worked out well. Like, as you look at this wall here, these same these lifting frames, I call them, the steel in the walls, those previously are where you would have a thickened area of concrete. So it literally, and from an engineering standpoint, it mimics the management of forces the same way as the old building, or as the old panel structure. And we recycled the same window buck mechanism. So we're putting all these windows in the walls before we tilt them up. So as we're putting them together.
Frames, not the glass.
Well, actually, yeah. Well, the window buck holds the frame, and then we take the sash out of the frame. So the frame itself actually is in the wall when we're tilting it up and so forth. Yeah, so it's a cousin of the old walls, but a distant cousin.
What were some of the qualities of the hempcrete that you learned about that made you say, yeah, I'm going to pull the trigger on this and make my panels out of hemp?
I would have to say it's, I'll back up for a second and say, I personally think concrete's the most amazing thing in the world. I mean, what other material is in a semi-liquid, viscous state that turns into rock? I mean, it really, we got to give it a lot of credit.
It's like our own lava.
It's unbelievable. And so what was so cool about hempcrete for me is that you're now taking a mineral, lime, hydrated lime, and you're blending it with a plant fiber. And it sets up too. It's different in many ways, but you get a hardened matrix, wall matrix that is robust. It's strong and it has real density to it. I think that's what really caught my attention. And then, of course, there's the important pieces of the fact that, well, this plant grows really fast, it grabs CO2 out of the atmosphere and turns it into oxygen and stores carbon in its roots, and you can store it away in a building. So you couldn't make a better fiber to sequester material into buildings. And a quick dialogue on the history of industrial hemp in Newburyport. Newburyport was a major shipping shipbuilding community back in the 1700s. And the hemp industry fed the manufacturing of all the rope. So all these rope houses in downtown, hundreds of yards long is where hemp fiber came in, and it was spun into all the rigging. And the sails, the manufacture of sails, all came from hemp. And I think that's just a really cool
And that was all
circle.
probably produced locally. Right?
Exactly. And I have not yet been able to find out more about that. But I plan on doing that because it clearly had to be a substantial harvest to get the volume needed to craft all the rigging and the sails. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. So here we are back in Newburyport,
Right.
building land ships.
I know this hemp herd sailed across the ocean from France.
It did.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that was a bummer. We were hopeful that we could get a fiber locally. Again, we're trying to manage our risks here because we're jumping into the deep end. Mm-hmm. And in using the system, the ER-Easy system, and shooting your hemp fiber into a wall, it is really important that the fiber length is consistent, it's not dusty, and it's packaged really well in a vacuum bag so that the material can't shake and shimmy as it moves around and create dust. dust is not your friend. So based mainly on the quality of the fiber and its compatibility with the E or Easy system, we thought, okay, let's just keep this simple. Now, there were some leads we had that looked promising from New York State that we pursued. At that time, their pricing actually was more than the fiber out of France.
Oh, that's interesting.
Landed. So risk management, cost was like, okay, let's
you
keep
knew it was going to work.
Yeah,
And, yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about like the wider implications of, you know, what this place means, like to the building industry. Like, will the rest of the trades, will they sort of tune into what you're doing here, or what do you think the wider implications are or should be?
Well, anyone who's worked in the trades knows no one likes a callback, right? And most builders I know do not want to screw around with risk. What is very unique about Keith Moscow and myself is that we are the developers, the builders, the architects, and then we end up owning the property and managing on an ongoing basis. So yes, we don't want callbacks. We know we're going to be living with our screw-ups, however. So there's never been sort of a better vertically integrated organization for pursuing something somewhat experimental. So in terms of the building industry, it will take a while. And I'm encouraged that the state under Governor Healy has been proactive about looking at this whole business of using less energy to build a building. Even if it's a super efficient building, you got to use less energy to do that. And how? Well, this is one good option. And it's exciting that in that more agrarian parts of the state, we can cultivate this. And as everyone knows, in the hemp industry, how you grow it, how you harvest it, how you transport it, and then how you process it is a big deal. And doing that in the right way is critical. You know, what seed hybrid are you using? You know, there's just so much. This field might have perform better with a different seed line than another. So we've got a long way to go. This has promise. There is no doubt in my mind. And Trevor Green, who has helped us with plastering here, said, I love the fact that it's a plant fiber and a mineral combination. And indeed, the plaster is sand. You want a very angular sand. But you're mixing sand and lime, and you're putting that on plant fiber mixed with lime. And it's a beautifully simple marriage to create shelter. And when you start working with it, you have to get it. But it takes a bit. It takes a bit because you're working with something. It's just not like OSB or zip board or foam, this, that, and the other thing.
A little more nuanced.
Well, it's nuanced, and it really everything nests together beautifully when you're done. So long as you take it the right steps at the right time, don't freeze it, you'll be okay. So yeah, and you can look around and see just how much hemp fiber is sitting in these walls here. It's a lot. It's cool.
Do you see yourself in like any kind of like Yankee tradition, New England ingenuity kind of thing? I don't know. I feel like New England has a reputation for, thinking out of the box a bit, or maybe.
Well, I hadn't thought about
but
that.
Also still conservative too. I don't know.
Yeah. No, you're right there. This just comes from, I think for Keith and I, both our parents were great stewards of the environment. They really gave a damn, and so clearly they passed that along to Keith and I. And hey, yeah, if the innovation can help spur along this concept in our area, all the better, and the sooner the better.
What do you think of hemp as maybe a material for retrofitting houses, like stripping them down to studs?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because right now we actually have gutted a large 3-bedroom unit in Newburyport. This is a timber frame, built in the 1700s when hemp was flying around Newburyport, and I think I have to speak to the building inspector, but I think we are going to pursue using the spray applied hemp fiber into those wall cavities from the inside. So the siding's still on. We're inside of a gutted unit, and so we'll set strapping up, and we'll set our conduit up, and we'll shoot this material, and then we'll rasp it down and screed it off. And it's perfect. It's great, because one thing you'll know if you've worked on old houses is there's nothing square or straight. So if you can shoot a material on and then screed it to all the varying surfaces, it's awesome, right? And then using a natural plaster over that, it's great. It's optimal. So we will be doing that too. I think there's a huge potential there, actually.
And around the country,
around the country,
look
yeah.
at small town America, like these houses need to be retrofitted for climate security and sustainability for the future.
Right.
So yeah, and which is a good implication for the hemp market and the building sector. So yeah,
right.
Cool. David Hall, anything else you want to share with us here today?
No. Well, thank you for taking the message throughout.
Yeah,
and across the airwaves. This is.
I wonder if you could give us like an introduction, like this is the Hillside Center, like just give me the top level
Sure.
what this place is.
So yeah, we are at the Hillside Center for Sustainable Living in Newburyport, Massachusetts. We are a community committed to low carbon living, and we are adapting our building systems to maximize sequestered carbon as we go through the development process.
Excellent. Thank you for doing that work. Congratulations.
All right.
Yeah, so all in all, it was an excellent trip up there to New England. I am grateful to Michael and David and Jeremy and Jill and all the folks that I talked to up there. Big shout out to my friend AJ, who I stayed with. Thank you so much for your hospitality. And I also did something completely unrelated to hemp. You may or may not know that I'm a musician, and I've been learning to play the fiddle this past year, and I sort of fell into a rabbit hole, a Shetland fiddle rabbit hole. And on Saturday, while I was up there, I met with a woman named Pam Swing, who happens to be sort of an expert in Shetland fiddle. So I'm working on a non-hemp podcast project that I will tell you about in the new year. But it was great to walk around Walden Pond with Pam and talk about creativity and intuition and traveling and Shetland fiddle and all the good stuff. And then after my walk with Pam, I spent some time in Concord. And it turns out that Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and Mary Louise Alcott are all buried within like the same 200-yard area in this, it's called Author's Ridge in the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. in Concord. So I spent some time there with, my favorite transcendentalists. So that was cool. But I mentioned in the beginning of the show that I was traveling to Cape Cod Thursday, and I stopped for breakfast. I searched for breakfast in my navigation app, and it took me to Percy's Place in North Plymouth on the way down to the Cape. Hello, could you introduce yourself?
My name is Lindsay. I'm actually from the Plymouth area.
Okay. Can you describe where we are right now?
So we're in Kingston, which is the next town over from Plymouth. Small town, but all the communities really come together.
Well, what is this place where we are?
Percy's Place.
Okay, describe this place. What is Percy's?
So it's definitely, it's very country bumpkin, but it's got like a cozy feel, family oriented.
Does that reflect the community?
I definitely believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Can you describe the community here in Kingston?
So I'm actually not really from Kingston per se, but
North Plymouth, or what would you
say? Yeah, right over the line of North Plymouth. So it's a big town, but definitely a good community.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you most concerned about, in the world or in your life?
Definitely, especially being in this industry. It's just the entitlement of people lately. Entitlement. People sometimes they come in and they're just completely. You can tell. I mean, everybody has problems and has their bad days and stuff like that. But you can tell it. Ever since COVID, people are angrier. Feel like me now. So.
Right. Do you have a sense of what people are angry about?
Oh, I'm sure it's everybody's got a problem, you know what I mean? But I just feel like you can see that it has progressed to people you can definitely tell, But, other than that, everything's great,
What are you most excited about or hopeful for?
Within...
However you want to answer that.
I have a pretty good positive attitude, I feel like everything's been through a lot. Everybody's been through a lot. Everybody has, their own problems, and you never really know what somebody's going through, So I always just try to keep a positive attitude, a positive outlook, Okay.
And it seems from my perspective here, you run the place? It seems like
I'm the manager, yes.
Okay.
But, we wouldn't be what we are without an actual team. It's definitely about the team.
Cool. What's the best thing here to order?
The hash is homemade, the corned beef hash. Really good. Definitely recommend it. Okay. The fish cakes are homemade. Actually, the bread's homemade. Muffins, everything, bakery-wise is homemade. Everything's really good. I can't say anything. I've had pretty much everything here, and it's amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
The sign outside says it's since 1982.
Yes.
Did you grow up coming here?
Yes, I actually, believe it or not, I started here 25 years ago as a teenager, and then.
What year was that you started?
2000.
Okay.
Yeah.
That flew
so
by,
close
right?
to 25 years ago. Yes. Yeah, definitely. And then, I pursued other things, went to college and stuff, but. I'm just a people person, and I like moving, and I even I worked in cardiology, doctor's offices, but just always came back. So, and I know the family; they're a really good family. So,
is their name Percy?
They're not. It's actually, I believe, it's an animal that they had on a farm that they used to have.
A rooster?
It's either a pig or a rooster. I can't.
Okay,
don't quote me on that one. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
All right, and then final bonus question.
Sure.
What do you know about, or what do you think about when you hear the word hemp or industrial hemp?
I guess I don't really have an opinion either way.
Do you know what it is?
I have hemp lotion and stuff. I feel like it's therapeutic, definitely.
Okay.
But
But other than that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Lindsay, thank you. It's great
Yeah,
to talk to you.
I appreciate
Thanks for
it.
breakfast, too.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that's it. That was my trip to Massachusetts. I hope you enjoyed listening to these conversations. I will be back in the new year towards the end of January. Okay, so if you don't see me in your feed for a while, that's why. I'm taking some time off, sort of getting the ducks in a row. I am so grateful to you, our listeners. Thank you for joining me on this journey in industrial hemp. And I really think 2024, we're going to be in for a wild ride, hemp-wise and, world-wise. My name is Eric Herlock. I'm the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. You can send me an email. You can send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com, and I'll get back to you. Okay? All right. Thank you so much. Remember, check out the show page for links to everything I mentioned here, including the Cape Cod Hemp House and the Hillside Village for Sustainable Living. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll see you on the other side.
Industrial hemp.
This final episode of Season 3 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2023 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock, and the music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.